For landlords, by landlords. The Rent Perfect Podcast with David Pickron.
Well, hello, David Pickron here. I am with Gary, and we are on another episode of the Rent Perfect Podcast. Subscribe, like us. We try to send you all kinds of good stuff. And today we're bringing back Gary. We had on the podcast a little while ago. We talked about something so briefly, but I thought we really should maybe talk about something that is really, especially in Arizona coming into the summertime, is really important to people. And that is something that I shy away from, but you use it as a marketing advantage, and that is having a pool in your backyard and being a landlord and managing a property with a pool. So to get to know Gary, go back a few podcasts when he came on. He's from New Jersey, invests in New Jersey, invests in Arizona. Just really, really good podcast on about the importance of relationships, having relationships with your tenants and taking care of them. So, Gary, thanks for coming back.
Well, thank you for having me back.
Certainly appreciate that. So I really wanted just a podcast on just pools. You know, I often meet landlords and I talk to them and I get their style and how they do things. And when we had lunch together a little while ago, you said that you like to have pools in your backyard. And one of the things that I would look at properties, I'd say I don't do pools. But this podcast isn't about how David Pickron manages properties. It's about how everybody manages properties and what works for you. So tell me about the advantages of having a pool.
I believe it is a large advantage. A lot of the phone calls we'll get when we have our homes up for rent, does it have a pool? Even though it's in the ad, but some people miss that.
All the time.
All the time. And being, like, as you said, being in Arizona, pool is very desirable.
Right. Okay, so it seems like when the market's hot and we're all renting our properties quickly and we're getting a million people applying for them, you know, we seem to like, oh, yeah, I don't need a pool. But as this starts to die down or as the leads start, you know, diminishing a little bit, you're going to jump ahead because a lot of more people are going to say, dang it, this home has a pool. I have kids. It's hot out. I like to sit out with suntan.
Maybe it's $100 more a month in rent, but it has a pool.
Right. So,
and I do believe it'll attract a different tenant base, perhaps more family.
And maybe when you go sell the property, it's going to attract a buyer.
Absolutely.
They don't have to put it in a pool. Okay, so I can tell you the downside because that's where my brain goes. But tell me, is there a downside that I should worry about?
You know, the biggest downside would be your tenant mistreating your pool, playing with your pool equipment.
You nailed it. That's my problem.
Changing your settings, what have you. You need to lay down that law up front and basically educate the tenant and tell them to leave your equipment alone, leave the pool alone. We have a pool service. You're paying it in your rent.
Right.
Don't touch anything.
I have this vision in my head where I go into my home and I walk into my backyard and it's just green with algae and flies and maybe the city sent me a notice and got a mosquito. I mean, for some reason that is, you know, and I'm in this business, been in this business for 20-something years, right? Have a pool in my own backyard, but I know how quickly you can lose a pool. And I think what you said is probably the key is don't touch my pool.
As long as you have a good pool service showing up consistently once a week, you will not have that problem.
Okay.
They're going to monitor your equipment. They're going to monitor your chemicals. They're going to do your brushing. They're going to do your vacuuming or backwashing.
And you made mention they pay extra rent. You figure 100, 150 bucks somewhere in there?
I'll build in the extra $100, $120 a month onto the rent.
Okay. Now,
I don't tell them they're paying extra for a pool service. I just say it's included in your rent.
Right. And they see that you're probably above market in the neighborhood, but then they say, well, it's got a pool, and that makes sense.
Exactly.
So, okay. Fear number 2 that I have. Kid drowns.
Oh, yes.
Falls into the pool. Something happens. Diving board breaks. Equipment. I mean, this liability.
First of all, we don't want a diving board.
Okay. So, you don't do a diving board?
No. If it had one, I would take it out.
Okay. That is good to know.
No. Basic pool.
Okay.
Make sure it's fenced in.
And just more out of curiosity, anything, do you have the 8-foot deep pools? Do you have the kind of the play pools? What do you have?
These were built, let's say they were built 20 plus years ago. So they were built large. These are
Okay.
these
At one
can-
point, they probably had a diving board on
They
them.
can be diving
Yeah.
pools. They're deep enough.
Gotcha.
They don't have diving boards. They didn't
Okay.
come with diving boards, and if they had them, I would have taken them out.
Okay, so you take the diving boards
But
out.
one thing they didn't have is fences. I
Okay.
fenced them. First thing, I fenced them in.
Right.
It looks a little awkward in the backyard, but I'd rather have that layer of protection.
Right. Now, do you have to inspect that fence every year? Do you feel like you have the responsibility to make sure the fence is up, or do you feel like you give that to your tenants in a lease and saying, hey, you need to let me know if anything needs to be...
I've had one tenant ask us if they can take their fence down. My answer was flat out, no.
Okay. And would
Absolutely
your
not.
pool service look at, say, hey, Gary, you got a fence problem over here, or would he report back to
Probably
you?
not.
Okay.
So that's something I'll keep my eyes on.
Okay.
We'll do that.
So do an inspection
every 6 months or every...
Okay.
I tend to do at least a drive-by the properties once every month, every other month.
Okay. And then you probably have some extra protection, insurance protection, I imagine.
Absolutely. Sure. Insurance all the way. Umbrella policy. Carry a large umbrella policy.
Okay.
That's all I can say.
Home in an LLC in case
Yes.
you get sued. It doesn't
Yes.
come out to your personal property.
Exactly.
So you do all the proper things. So if you have
Yes.
a pool, Gary loves it, and I'm leaning, Gary. You're convincing me not to be afraid of
Don't
the
be
pool,
afraid of the pool.
right? And just make
Don't
sure
be
that I
afraid of
have
the pool.
my own service guy go back there and do it. So, okay, great. Anything else about pools you think that?
It may add a little bit of extra water, money to the water bill for your tenant,
Okay.
but that's not a lot of money. Pool heaters, I tend to shy away from pool heaters. That's just another
Okay.
piece of equipment that's going to fail at some point,
Okay,
but it's also expensive
it is
for the tenant.
It is. If you had a built-on jacuzzi with a heater, would that bother you?
That wouldn't bother me as long
Okay.
as we had a very good deal on that home going into it.
Okay,
So,
and maybe have extra explanation to the
yeah.
tenants to say, hey, if you flip the switch and you heat the pool instead of the jacuzzi, or you're heating that jacuzzi every night, you're paying the gas
You're
bill.
paying that gas bill or that
and-
propane bill, whatever it is,
Right.
and it will get expensive.
Okay, awesome. So maybe in your leash, it's one more paragraph you go through. It talks about the rules of the
Yeah,
pool
a
and
couple
what you
more
need to expect.
sentences in the
Yeah.
lease, but nothing major.
Right,
Most people appreciate the pool. Most people, a lot of people have experience with pools themselves, so
right.
they're not afraid of them themselves.
Yeah, especially here in Arizona, for
Right,
sure.
Right.
But, pools are all across the country, and we're a podcast that goes all across the country. So have you ever had one? And I don't think we really have out-of-ground pools here in Phoenix.
I have not
but-
seen an above-ground
No?
pool here, popular on the East Coast. Now, one nice thing about pools here in Arizona, you don't have to winterize and cover them.
Okay.
You're on the East Coast. Every fall, the pool gets covered,
Right.
winterized, and you open it up in the next spring, it's a mess.
Right.
It's a big expense.
Well, I'm an Arizona boy through and through. I know Arizona pools. That's all I know, and I love them, and I love
Yeah.
to be in them, and look forward to swim season. So, hey, Gary says don't be afraid of
Don't be
pools.
afraid.
Don't listen to me. I might be coming to the other side here a little bit. We certainly appreciate you coming over here and just kind of giving your view on, if you're a first-time buyer of a rental and it's got a pool, Gary says go for it.
Don't be afraid.
And until next time, we appreciate you joining us. Rent Perfect.